Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I actually do have a confession to make. I attended my first conference in 1992. For those of you that are good at math, that's 26 conferences. This is the 26th one. I haven't gone to every one, but this is the 26th one. This is actually my first speech at a submitters conference. Everyone who knows me knows I love to talk, so this is kind of surprising probably to some of you, but I can't be happier that this is where I get to give, mashallah, my first speech. So to start with, everybody always, every time something scientific comes up, they always go, Ali always talks about scientific stuff or fishing stuff. So I just want to let you guys know I'm not going to disappoint you. I will talk about fishing and I will talk about science, inshallah. This is more about how science works as a whole. There's this idea of how do we know stuff that has to do with science? What process do we go through? And how do we apply that to submission? Because the scientific method is the best method as human beings we have to prove something to be true or false. So the way it works is you make an observation, you start asking questions, you formulate a hypothesis, you gather data, you refine the hypothesis, you formulate a new hypothesis, you gather more data, and you keep going through this loop. For us, we use this in physics, we use it in chemistry, biology. And then for me personally, it's valuable because of where I work, which is in the field of mathematics and computer science. So let me start with an example for you guys. Let's say if I want to know if I'm a smart person. Now I can look back, I can say, I'm going to look back at the past 3 years of my life. I can look back at the past 3 years and come up with some examples where I've done some pretty smart things, mashallah. But that doesn't prove that I'm a smart person, because I can go over those 3 years and come up with some concrete examples of dumb things that I've done. So in theory, I'm either a smart person who sometimes does dumb things, or I'm a dumb person who sometimes does smart things. So that's the scientific method. I have to always be asking that question. Am I smart or am I dumb? And I just get lucky sometimes. So the same thing goes with us for our submission. If you want to feel good about yourself, you can look back at some period in your life and say, look at all the great things I've done as a submitter. Or you can look back throughout a certain period of your life and say, look at all the bad things I've done and feel bad about yourself. So you would ask yourself, am I a good submitter who sometimes makes mistakes? Or am I a weak submitter who needs to improve themselves? The important thing is every single day we get that opportunity to ask that question. You wake up, you ask that question, you go to bed, you ask that question. Am I going to be a good submitter today? Am I going to do all the right things? Even if you fail, if I look back on tonight, and I say, I failed to be a good submitter, I get another chance tomorrow, God willing. So we never ever want to despair. 39:53, I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. O my servants, to exceed the limits, never despair of God's mercy, for God forgives all sins. He is the forgiver most merciful. So the goal here is to always keep a tally. How am I doing today? How did I do yesterday? How did I do the day before? So you keep that tally and you keep it going. If you see yourself day after day failing, you got to start making changes. That's the scientific method. That's the refinement. You ask the question, you come up with a hypothesis. I want to be a good submitter today, inshallah. If it doesn't happen, you got to refine it. You got to make improvements. I'll get into an example of that later on, God willing. But here's an example. Let's see. One of the benefits that we have is, and I wanted to get into another subject, but I'll start with this first, inshallah. We get reminders from others. And sometimes this may seem somewhat annoying, but it's extremely important because you can't see what you do. You can't see the way you behave. Sometimes we're not perfect, and other people are able to make observations on us and give us feedback. 51, 55, and remind for the reminder benefits the believers. Now remember, if it benefits you, it's because you're a believer. God wanted you to hear that. We hear the expression, you're your own worst critic. That's not true. A lot of times I think more highly of myself than other people do. So we have to always be reminded by submitters. They say, hey, I've noticed you're complaining a lot today. Take heed. So here's the first example of this whole process and how I use it in my day-to-day life. This is outside of submission. I'm a software engineer. I write software on a daily basis. I sit down, I start to program, and I have a nemesis. He's actually a friend of mine, and he hates the fact that I call him a nemesis because we've been friends for 9 years. But at work, he's my nemesis because he's sitting there thinking, he knows me very well. All he's going to forget to check for this. All he's going to forget to check for that. He's writing code that's going to destroy my code. In real life, we have a nemesis like that. It's Satan. He knows us. I mean, I'm thinking, if I have a guy who I see maybe once a month, and he knows the way I code that well, Satan is observing us all the time. He knows every single weakness that we have, and he knows how to come at us. So this guy, he sits there, he writes code. And at some point, I finish, he finishes, and we put it together, and my stuff starts to fail. Now, I could attack him and say, your tests are invalid, this is a bad thing you're doing, you're making me look bad. The reality of it is, what I do is I join him. I fix the problems that I have, and I join him in writing more tests to break my tests, right? So that's our job as software engineers, and that's our job as submitters. Someone's attacking you, join in with them. Attack yourself back. Yes, you're right, I am objecting. Don't object to you objecting. So when I finish my code, I submit it for review. Now this is the part that I have to say can really test your ego. Because people will come in and tell you how to do your job. They'll say, I don't like the way you wrote this code, I don't like the way this is. The truth of it is, everyone I work with, at the end of the day, we're going to put out a product out. And my bonus, their bonus, everybody's bonus depends on the product that we put out. So they're saying things because they want to get a good bonus at the end of the year, right? They're not saying it to be mean to me. They're saying it for their own best interest. So it's my job, because I know this person has my best interest in me. Just like the submitters that come to me and tell me about mistakes that I've made or things that I'm doing wrong. The idea is that I take in their input, I put it in my code, and I never get offended. Nowhere in this flow of developing software is my ego, my feelings, any of this supposed to get involved. It's supposed to be, people come to attack your code, people come to attack the software you've written, people come and give you all the criticism because they honestly want the best for the software you've written. They could care if I'm dead or alive. They want my software to be good because they want their bonus to be good. So again, God never does things haphazardly. You hear something, you were meant to hear it. Take heed. Now, we have something in our lives that also exists in science. It's called a litmus test. Now, a litmus test, if you don't know what it is, it's an organic compound. They put it in pieces of paper. You put that paper in water and it comes back out, or in some sort of a fluid. And if it comes out red, it's acid. If it comes out blue, it's an alkaline. So you put it in coffee, it comes out red. You put it in some eternal water, it'll come out blue. So I had to throw in a plug here. So it's the only alkaline solution I could actually honestly think of is eternal water. So if you put the paper in some fluid and you bring it out and the paper is missing, run for your life, right? This is not a good solution. So our personal litmus test is our whole life. If you're a happy submitter, if you're a happy person, things are going good for you, you're doing good. If things are not going good for you, you're in the red or the blue or however you want to look at it. That litmus test is telling you you're not doing well. There's little aspects, there's pieces. You have your children. you have your spouse, you have your friends. If any of these things all of a sudden starts becoming a source of problem, join in with them, right? Just remember that. If I understand why. My personal litmus test, and here we go, has always been something which is my hobby. Like, this is one of my litmus tests. So obviously I'm married, I have kids. There's days I'm doing good, everything's good. There's days my kids are driving me crazy and I'm having a hard day. And I know my submission is bad. But there's always my fishing, which I can always go out there and figure out whether I'm doing good or not. There's a certain community, which is a great example of what my personal hobby life is like. 7163. Remind them of the community by the sea who desecrated the Sabbath. When they observed the Sabbath, the fish came to them abundantly. And when they violated the Sabbath, the fish did not come. We thus afflicted them as a consequence of their transgression. So when my submission is good, I mean, honestly, when my submission is good, I can go out. It's almost too easy. And a lot of times I hear my friends tell me, boy, you're so lucky, the word lucky. But then there's times when everybody's doing really well and they're wondering what's wrong with me because I couldn't shoot a fish in a barrel if it came down to it. So I have a story that starts out great, mashallah. I was doing really well in my submission. It was a time where I was taking things extremely seriously because I had just turned 40. And I was like, this is where the rubber meets the road. And I got to be very serious and I can't goof off. I remember driving to the lake shortly after my birthday. And I was taking these long drives. And I'd be praying to God on the way to the lake for a certain result I want. I want to go out today and catch 20 fish, and I want them all to be big. And subhanAllah, I'd go out there, I'd catch 20 fish or more, and they'd all be big. And I started to get, more and more audacious. And I said, I want to catch the biggest fish that's been caught out of that lake in the last 10 years at least. I want it to be this big. And subhanAllah, God answered that question. I mean, it was amazing. This gets bad, right? Because I wouldn't be telling you if it was a good story. So like anything, my wife always tells me, so mashallah, we're going to be celebrating our 15th year. So if anybody knows me well, it's her. 15 years, inshallah Tuesday, mashallah. So she always tells me you're addicted. And that literally, that's what happened, is you have this great result and you want to just keep doing it over and over again. But what feeds those results is my submission. So the second I start getting addicted and I start thinking about it too much, my submission goes downhill. And the fishing went downhill with it. So now I went from catching the biggest fish in the lake in 10 years to now I can't even find a fish to save my life. So I start obsessing, I start thinking more about it, I get more greedy. And one day I remember I was stuck in traffic, I was objecting, I couldn't get to the lake on time, they were about to close, it's winter time, it's going to be dark, I don't want to be caught out there in the dark. I was driving and upset and angry, and I look in my rearview mirror, and something that should have been back there, my boat was there, but something on the boat that should have been there was no longer there. So I pulled to the side of the road, and one of the pieces of equipment on the back of my boat had fallen off, and I'd been dragging it on the freeway in traffic. Now, thank God I wasn't going, 80 miles an hour. I was in traffic, but dragging anything behind your car is always a bad idea. So I had taken on some damage. It still worked, but it was pretty badly damaged. And I knew why. So I even arranged it so I could have this thing fixed and get on the water. I get home. I call the manufacturer, and at this point, I know exactly what's happened. I repent. I say, I'm sorry, God. I'll have to focus more on my faith. I know what I did wrong. And I call up the manufacturer, and I tell them what happened. They say, you dragged this behind the car for how many miles? I don't know, 5, 6 miles. He says, is it still working? I said, yeah. So send us a picture, and we'll fix it for free. SubhanAllah. So it gets restored for free. So some time goes by, I'm doing great, mashallah, and slowly again, as things get better and better, I start to go more and more downhill. So this time, it's like anything else, as things go down, this time you fall even harder. So this time my engine blew up. So now I got to take it in, and it's a boat, and nobody works on boats, and everything costs a lot of money. So I take it in, and now I'm without my boat for a month and a half, as they fix the engine. And I got time to think. I'm thinking, man, being without a boat, I got some perspective. But as soon as the time came for me to get my boat back, I started getting that addiction back in me again. Like, I can't wait to get it back. I can get out there, and I start obsessing again. So again, back to the same cycle. A little bit more time goes by, and this time I crashed my boat on an island in the middle of the lake that nobody even knew was there. We have a drought in California. There's like all kinds of new things coming up. So I hit this island with my boat, and now I got a big hole in the bottom of it. I got to take it in. And when I wrote this, it was before, it was actually not before, it was during Ramadan, while we were fasting. So I started to write this for a sermon. And I had written in that I put a blank line, and it took me blank number of months to get it back. I still haven't gotten it back, right? So I know there's learning that I have to do. So this time, as the experiment goes on, that's part of the whole scientific process. Like I said, you got to refine it and you got to learn. So, mashallah, now I don't get the opportunity to obsess. I don't even get to think about it. The boat's gone. It's out of my system. If I go out fishing, it's because somebody invites me. I don't get to obsess anymore. And I'm learning to deal with that addiction, which is not really, it is an addiction, right? Anytime something overtakes your mind and you have to do it, it's an addiction. But I know every time I go out, that litmus test is good, mashallah. So after Ramadan, I went out and I caught 100 fish when nobody was catching any fish, or 75 fish. SubhanAllah, it was amazing. And I knew, and I turned to my partner that I'm very slowly giving the message to. I said, this was my reward for fasting for 1 month. Then the next time we went out, everybody was catching 100 fish. So I prayed, I said, I want to catch the biggest fish. And subhanAllah, I got that again. But I don't get to go back and obsess. This time I get to go back and say, thank you, God, for giving me this. Maybe I'll get invited out next month, 2 months, who knows. So subhanAllah, I get to have the reward, and I get to come back and learn how to cope with that success and not having to have that feeling of wanting to go back out and repeat it again. So for me, being out on the water, it's easy to be devoted to God. It's really easy. Either I'm praying to catch a fish, I can't find anything, and I'm praying to catch a fish, or I'm out there glorifying God because I'm out in nature, everything's great. It's very easy to do it when you're out there. It's when you step away that it becomes hard. 32:21, God says, we let them taste the smaller retribution of this world before they incur the greater retribution of the hereafter, that they may take a hint and reform. So the simple conclusion I came to from this experience is this. If anything in your life is hurting you, has become a problem, is causing you grief, then either you have to fix it or it's going to try to fix you. It's one way or the other. And if you keep ignoring it, make excuses, keep repeating it, it's going to be like that paper in the litmus test that comes back, with no paper. So, and I always go back to the Prophet Solomon during these times. I keep thinking about him. He missed his prayer, and he said, I'm going to get rid of these horses. I'm no Prophet Solomon. I still can't get rid of my horse. But I know that, inshallah, if I continue, if I make myself stronger, and I ask that question every day, am I a submitter? Was I a submitter? Am I going to be a submitter today? What can I do to do that? That's my hypothesis. And at the end of the day, I come back and I ask myself, did I succeed in this? That whole scientific process. And whatever reminders I get throughout that day, I got to take heed. There's a reason why I'm hearing this. So with each individual test result, with each individual experiment, each individual day, I should be able to tally those days and say I'm making an improvement, not going the other direction like I was before. Thank you so much. All right. I didn't know there was going to be a Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
How big was the fish you caught?
Okay, it was 13.95 pounds, which is, I wish I had, I didn't present anything, but it was big, it was gigantic. If you go to my Facebook, it's on there.
Ali Jan, did you get any more sturgeon?
No, I haven't. The last sturgeon I got, I gave to you guys. I think.
Mashallah.
So, I won't forget.